Hi, my name is Kate. Today I'm going to show you how to make owl plushies.
Customize your owl with rickrack, fur feathers, and contrast fabrics.
So grab your favorite fabrics and let's jump right in.
Download the pattern for this owl on my website. The link is below in the description. Then we're going to need 2 fabrics. I like to use a solid and a print, but you can use 2 prints or 2 solids if you prefer. We're going to use felt for the eyes. There are a few size templates you can play with to create your own custom eye. You can also use buttons if you prefer. Next, you'll need lightweight fusible interfacing. This is soft interfacing that will iron onto the back of our fabric, and some stuffing. We'll use 1/2-inch rickrack to make the owl look like it has little feathers. We're going to start by backing our fabrics with lightweight fusible interfacing. I like to back the fabric before cutting the pattern pieces because then you'll end up with crisper edges. Use your main pattern piece to cut 1 layer from each fabric. And then we're going to cut out wings. So the wings need to be cut mirror image of each other. So the best way to do that is to fold your fabric in half and then place the wing on the folded fabric. Then when you pull your pins out, you'll have 2 wings that are mirror image of each other. So repeat that with your lining fabric. We're ready to start sewing once you have 2 body pieces and 4 wing pieces. Start by deciding which fabric will be your front and which will be your back. The back's going to fold over to the front like this, so that'll help you decide. Use your pieces to play with different variations until you decide which one you like best. Our first step will be adding rickrack at the bottom. So I like to fold over the top of the owl and then put the eyes on top to help me decide where to put these little feathers. Then we're just going to sew straight through the rickrack. Once your rickrack is on, we're going to add the eyes. Fold over the top of your owl at the fold line to kind of get placement for these. You can use fabric glue or even sew these on. While your glue is drying, we'll assemble the wings. So we're going to take 1 solid wing and put it on the print. These wings are a little bit different since we cut them on the folded fabric for mirror image, so make sure you're getting the right wings together. We're just going to sew the edges without that little line. So these are the point edges of the wing. Sew down and then pivot at the point of the wing, and we're going to leave that straight edge open because we're going to sew it to the owl. Use a 1/4 inch seam allowance with this wing, and then we're just going to trim that point so we get a nice point. You can trim the seam allowance a little bit too. Now you can turn your wing right side out. I like to use a chopstick to help me get that point, and if you need to, you can put a pin in there to get that tiny little wing point out. Once you've done that with both, we're going to give them a really good press. Now we're going to sew the wings to the front of the owl. So grab your owl piece, and then you can also grab your pattern to get the placement right. There is a little mark where the middle of the wing goes. So line that up. Then fold your wing onto the top of the owl with right sides together. Pin those wings on, and then we're going to base them just along the edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Pull that out of your machine and you can see how cute that little owl is going to look. So now leave the wings folded in. We're going to place the back of the owl on top and pin all the way around. Now we're going to sew around the owl with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, leaving an opening at the bottom about 2 inches wide. Now we're going to trim off the seam allowance a little bit, making sure to clip at the top point and then also clip into the curves at the bottom of the owl. Clipping the curve at the bottom and notching out some of that fabric will give you a good shape when we stuff it. Turn the owl right side out through that opening and use a chopstick to help you get the curves and the edges and the points out. Now give your owl a good press, focusing on the seam and the points. Now we're going to focus on the bottom opening part. So we want that curve to be matching the curve of the owl. So press it under and match up those edges. Now grab some stuffing. We're going to stuff the owl. We don't want to stuff it all the way at first. We kind of want to give it a partial stuff in the body. When the owl is partially stuffed, we're going to stop stuffing for a second and fold over that top point. This is the beak eyebrow shape of the owl. So find where the fold line is on the pattern piece. We're going to fold that over, and you can kind of play with this since we haven't stuffed it fully. Your decision's not permanent yet, so kind of play with the owl's beak until you like the placement. I like it to come over the eyes just a little bit like this. And then we're going to pin that down and we're going to hand sew it to keep it in place. Before we sew the beak, we're going to finish stuffing the owl. So finish stuffing until you like how much it's stuffed. Then you can just pin that bottom closed, and we'll get to that later. Grab a needle and thread, and we're going to use a slip stitch or a ladder stitch to sew on about 1 inch from the point of the beak down to the point and back up about 1 inch. This will keep the beak in place so it has that cute look we want. Once you've finished tacking that on, tie off your thread, and then we're going to finish the bottom of the owl the same way.
I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you're looking for another beginner sewing project, click on the video above.